Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Sunday Gita class with some Gita Dhyanam. Om Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritvarshini Bhagavati Mashtadasha Dhyayane Amb Tvam Anusandhami Bhagavata Gite Bhavjeshini नमो अस्तु ते व्यास विशाल बुद्धे फुल अरविंद आयत पत्र नेत्र येन तव्या भारत तैल पूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञान मया प्रदीपः परपन पारी जाताये तोत्र वेत्र एक पाने ज्ञान मुद्राय कृष्णाय गीता अमृत दुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोगदा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोगता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूरमर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगत गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ जला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्राहवती कृपेन वाहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोरमकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तने सो तीर्ना खलु पांडवै रन्नदी के वर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोज अमलम गीता अर्थ गंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपदय रह पे पिये मानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल पध्वंसी न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरिम यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानंद माधवम यम ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र रुद्र मरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्ये स्तवे वेदे सांग पदक्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यम सामगा ध्यानवस्थे तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुसुर असुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. So chapter 13, Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yog. That is the title of this chapter. And we finished verse number 8. And I told you that these few verses, Lord Krishna is going through some of the purification requirement if you need to know the Kshetrajna. Okay. Theoretically, we know what Kshetrajna is, the knower of the field. The field is this body, the subtle body, the physical body, the causal body. That's all the field. But knower of the field is the Atma. In order to really have the subjective experience, we need to have some purification. So there are 4 verses where he's mentioning the virtues, the habits, the behaviors, the attitudes, which will purify our life and illuminate our intellect with this light of knowledge. So last time when we finished on verse number 8, in your books, it's verse number 7. So one verse missing in your books. So in that verse number 7, I'll always tell you the verse number which is in your book so that you don't get thrown off. Humility, unpretentiousness, non-injury, forgiveness, uprightness, service to the teacher, purity, steadfastness, self-control. So these are the qualities we talked about. And I told you, just write them down on a piece of paper and see where do you need to work on, which quality, this week or this month or this year. Let's look at next verse, verse number 8. Indriye artheshu vairagyam anahankara evacha janam mrityu jara vyadhi dukh dosh anudarshanam. Indriye artheshu, that means of the sense objects. See, indriya means the senses, arth means the objects. Vairagyam, dispassion. Anahankara, absence of egoism. Ev means even, cha means and. Janam is birth, mrityu death, jara old age, vyadhi sickness. These are basically 4 stages of our life. Birth, death, old age, and sickness also comes in between. Dukh is pain, dosh is evil, anudarshanam, perception of. So indifference to the objects of the senses, that is one quality, or dispassion to the objects of the senses. And also absence of egoism, that's the second one. Perception of, or at least reflection upon, evils on birth, death, old age, sickness, and pain. Let's look at them one by one. Absence of attachment for objects. In the previous verse, he mentioned self-control. Self-control is a preliminary stage to this level. So in other words, a dispassion is a higher stage, because in self-control, we restrain ourselves by force. But vairagya is a lack of taste for sensual pleasures, because sensual pleasures are the obstacles on the path of spirituality. Okay, so by having or cultivating the self-control, eventually you reach there where there's a dispassion. You don't even have to make any effort. So this does not mean that we got to run away from the objects of the world. We got to learn how to live in the middle of these objects, but only switch off our mental preoccupation with them. So in other words, learn to live among the objects in a detached manner, not getting shackled by them. Okay, so that is absence of attachment for object. Attachment is with the mind, so we got to work on the mind. Abandonment of the thought of I, anahankara, absence of egoism. The individuality sense comes only when we identify ourselves with the equipments. Okay, whether it's a body or any kind of achievement or anything outside of us too. So to reduce this delusory misconception of ourselves is an essential prerequisite to experience our real nature, Kshetrajna. So egoism is the conscious awareness of I, me, mine. It's also called aham chetna. It's like a pride. When the pride arises out of them, these accomplishments or these temporary layers of our personality. So that's why he said anankara. Then he talked about perception of the evil of pain in birth, death, old age, and sickness. This is what set the Buddha on the spiritual path. His intellect was so perceptive that just one exposure of these facts of life made him renounce worldly existence. We all know he was a prince. He saw an old man, a sick man, a dead body on the street. Do we have this kind of a decisive intellect? If we don't, we got to cultivate it. If we want to experience reality. So feeling of discontentment with the available situation alone can goad us to discover a new state of existence. Okay. Normally, we are just very comfortable in our, as we call it, a comfort zone. We think it's okay. It's okay to be bondaged. We are not looking for the ultimate freedom. But when we have a perception of the evil in these, that birth is painful, sickness is painful, old age is painful, death is extremely painful. Every physical body in this world goes through these modifications. Each one of them is an inlet for fresh sources of sorrow. In all these stages, we got to constantly recognize the pain, and we got to feel the impatience with it, that, hey, what can I do right now so that I don't have to go through this again, the cycle? This is almost like a sense of revolt against pain is the fuel that drives the seeker's faster. That's what happened to Buddha. In the next verse, in verse number 9, he says, Asaktihi anabhishtvang putra dar grih adishu nityam cha samchitvam isht anisht upatishu. Asakti, non-attachment. Anabhishtvang, non-identification. Putra is the son or the offspring. Dar is the wife, the spouse. Grih is the home. Adishu, the rest. So with the son, wife, home, and the rest. Nityam, constant. Cha means and, samchittatvam, even-mindedness. Isht anisht upatishu, on the attainment of the desirable and the undesirable. Isht anisht. Okay. So non-attachment, non-identification of self with the son, wife, home, and the rest, and constant even-mindedness on the attainment of the desirable and the undesirable. So these are more qualifications we need to cultivate. Okay. So non-attachment, the first one is like a dispassion towards the world. The seeker replaces worldly attachment with the attachment to God. Mind can be attached on one thing at any given time. So Lord Krishna is saying that attach your mind to God, non-attached from the world. Because the minds are sticking onto the various objects of the world, we start liking them extremely. When we like something extremely, that is what's called attachment. So it is like a mental contact with the world outside. That's the one which brings the agitations in our mind, which is called a desire. He mentioned the desire many times. It's almost like a fire itself cannot burn. But when we put our finger into the fire, it will burn. So we cannot blame the fire, but our desire to propel our finger into the fire. That's how the actual contact came, and that's where the suffering came. So this is what happens in the outer world in the different ways. So mental contacts with the world outside provides the breeding centers for all our sorrows in life. So to keep the mind away from all attachments would be to assure it a peaceful life. Asakti. Absence of excessive love for child, wife, home, and the like. Excessive love or affection is an intense form of attachment to another. It consists in our total identification with the object of our affection. The lover loses his personal identity when a lover identifies with the beloved to such an extent that a happiness of the lovers or a happiness of the child is my happiness. The sadness of the child is my sadness. That is the identification. This kind of an intimate relationship is generally we see between a parent and a child. Okay, so to build a wall of discrimination. So he is not saying don't do your duties, but he's telling us to build a wall of discrimination around our inner personality so that our mind does not get disturbed and loses its equanimity. Because if the mind stays disturbed, we cannot have any progress or any spiritual growth. We got to remember that. So we got to practice all this so that there's an evenness of mind can be maintained unbroken in all situations. That's why he said, Ishta Anishta. In this worldly life, we will go through some likable events, some not likable events, but throughout both, we got to have an evenness of the mind if we want a growth in this area. So desirable as well as undesirable. A human mind relieved from its preoccupations with its own present attachment and affection will discover a tremendous amount of surplus energy. We don't realize how much energy we dissipate with these likes and dislikes, with these attachments to the worldly relationships or worldly objects. Because when we have conserved that energy, because energy is in us, we conserve it, we can really move towards the higher realms. And this is what he is discussing in the next verse. That how to channel that energy. Because we all know that life is more than merely preventing the undesirable. Because so far he is telling us, don't do this, don't do this. It's almost like somebody telling us, don't eat junk food. Then a person has to tell us what to eat also. So life is about engaging in the desirable. And the desirable goal of life is to consecrate it at the lotus feet of God. That's what he's telling us. Mei cha ananya yogena bhakti avyabhicharani vivikta desha sevitvam arati jan samsiddhim. Mei, to me. Cha means and, ananya yogen, by the yoga of non-separation. Bhakti, devotion. Avyabhicharani, unswerving. Vivikta desha sevitvam, resort of solitary places. Arati, distaste. Jan samsiddhi, for the society of people. So unswerving devotion unto me by the yoga of non-separation. Simple terms, ananya bhakti, at the feet of Lord. Love God. Because that's our goal. Love God. Resorting to solitary places is not asking us to run into the forests. Solitary place can be in our own home. Distaste for the society of men. You don't have a desire to become a popular anymore. So this verse describes the right application of that conserved energy which I was talking about in the proper channels, so we can have a self-unfoldment. We get to know who we are. It takes some time. So unflinching devotion to me, that is number one. We have to learn how to concentrate or focus our mind on a particular point to the exclusion of all mental excitement and agitations. That is a ananya or avyabhicharane, mind which wants to go every which way, but tell your mind, no. At least for a period of time, if not all day long, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever you can do. Try to bring your mind in your control. This steadiness in contemplation may be destroyed by causing the causes arising from two different places. It could be our own mind. Our own mind has so much in there, it just does not let us concentrate. It's almost like you are sitting in a room with no reason, you just want to get out. It's your own restlessness. Or somebody can knock at your door and then you will go out. So it's your own mind which is disturbing you, or some kind of an object outside will make your mind disturbed. So we got to make both of them steady. Only then our concentration will be successful. Otherwise, we are just wavering. Even in our bhakti, we waver when we have too many idols in our temple. One day, mind is concentrating on one form, another day, different form. So that's why Ananya, just one, is very important. Until and unless you can see that light, really have a subjective experience of that light in that idol. Because there is no difference in that, but the forms are different. So we got to work on that also. Only then we'll see the progress. So by the yoga of non-separation, that is an undivided attention and enthusiasm in the mind, we should cultivate. That is another condition. A mind which is wedded to the Lord is a mind at faithful contemplation. So whenever we get a chance in our mind, put the thoughts of the Lord. Through the stories, through the chants, through the images, whatever helps, put more and more God in there. Such an integrated life of stable mind, steady contemplation upon a firm idea is impossible actually, unless we have a conducive environment. And this is what he is prescribing here in this verse. Resort to solitary places and have a distaste, develop a distaste for the crowded society life. If we are just gushing to every invitation we get, every Friday night, Saturday night, going out, we cannot be a devotee of this level. So resort to solitary places, start at least a few minutes a day. Solitary place. Nobody can, even if you're living with somebody, just tell that person, don't disturb me. Keep your phones away, because these days phones disturb us too. All those gadgets, keep them away. Solitary. And just have a smaller circle. Sure, we are social beings, we need some friends and family. But excessiveness is, we got to let it go. And ultimately, we'll see that what kind of a peace we feel. How much time do we have for all this? Otherwise, 24 hours a day, all of us are given. It's up to us. What do we do in those 24 hours? Do we want to spend with God, or do we want to spend with the worldly people? Because I know you're all very intelligent people. What happens when we are in a party or talking to worldly people? We all know that's a waste of time. This precious human life we have been given to attain godhood. So we got to think about that. Whenever the mind is fascinated by an enchanting ideal, it loses all its contact with other preoccupations. Only then we see that faithfully we are absorbing the divine, or we are absorbing ourselves into divine. So these two terms over here, resort to the solitary places and distaste for the crowded society of life, should not be misunderstood as physical escapism. Okay, so this is a sadhana we need to do ultimately, which will take us towards the divinity. Next verse, verse number 11. Adhyatma jnana nityatvam tattva jnanartha darshanam etat jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yat ata anyatha. Adhyatma jnana nityatvam. Adhyatma jnana is self-knowledge. Nityatvam, constancy. So constancy in self-knowledge. Tattva jnanartha darshanam. Tattva jnana is the true knowledge. So perception of the end of a true knowledge. That means the philosophical pursuit of the absolute truth. Like all this knowledge at the end, where is it taking us? What is the goal of all this self-knowledge? Etat means this, jnanam knowledge, iti thus, proktam declared. Ajnanam ignorance, yat means which, ataha to it, anyatha opposed. Constancy in self-knowledge, perception of the end of true knowledge, this is declared to be knowledge. And what is opposed to it is ignorance. So this is a concluding section, a verse of this section. So we went through all the essential qualifications in a seeker. So now Lord Krishna is adding to the list of these qualifications two more items actually. Constancy in self-knowledge and understanding the end of the true knowledge. So in other words, theoretically, to know something is not enough. We got to learn how to practically implement it. It's almost like anger. Theoretically, we all know we should not get angry. Anger burns us. But are we practicing it or not? Or theoretically, we know. We tell our children, grandchildren, tell the truth. Do we tell the truth or not? So we got to look at it. Are these qualities, they reside inside us or not? So constancy in self-knowledge. So that means the knowledge of the self is to be lived. And not just merely to be learned. That's what it means, constancy in self-knowledge. If the self is one everywhere, and the self alone is real, the seeker should try to live as the self at all levels of his or her personality. To think about it. So that means the constancy of living the spiritual knowledge at all levels of our contact with the world outside. Constantly we are having a contact with the world. That is unavoidable actually. Once we have taken birth, we got to live in this world. It's almost like if I go into the water, better learn how to swim out of the water. The same way, this world, we are here right now. But we got to learn how to get out of it. So all the virtues, the behaviors, and attitudes described in these verses lead to the growth of wisdom and knowledge. So another thing he said, understanding the end of true knowledge. So sure, we got to remember constantly the goal of our endeavor is to add more enthusiasm to our activities and should be kept in view. And what is the end? Liberation, freedom, moksha, nirvana, whatever you want to call it. Okay? So liberation from all our imperfections and limitations is the end which is striven for by all aspirants. Okay? So these very qualities are called knowledge, gyan. Because once these qualities have been developed fully in our mind, our vehicle, which is a mind and the intellect, is ready to go forward then. Because the qualities are cultivated in the subtle body. That's where the goal or to reach the goal becomes easier. Pure knowledge is the self, but knowledge of all these qualities is needed too. And what is that which has to be known by the knowledge? Beautiful verse number 12. Geyam yat tat pravakshyami yat gyatva amritam ashnute anadimat parambam na sat tat na asat uchyate. Geyam has to be known. Yat means which, tat means that. Pravakshyami will declare. Again, yat means which, gyatva, knowing. Amritam, immortality. Ashnute, attains to. Anadimat, the beginningless. Param Brahma, supreme Brahma. Na means not, sat means being, tat means that, na asat, not, non-being, uchyate is called. I will declare. Lord Krishna is saying that which has to be known. Knowing which, what one attains to immortality, Amrita. The beginningless supreme Brahma, called neither being nor non-being. So after explaining in the previous section of 5 verses, which were like a aid or steps in aid for knowledge. That's why I kept saying that these are the qualities we need to cultivate. Now Lord Krishna is promising that he will explain what is to be known. That's what he's saying, knowing which one attains the immortal. That means you will rediscover the spiritual nature in yourself. And after that, there's no fearful concept or the experience of death. Because you have entered into a field of a joyous spiritual nature, which is without beginning or end. Anadi mat param. A beginning can be conceived and calculated only with reference to what is the substratum of all, which substratum must be existent even before time. And supreme is always considered beginningless. Because where did the time come from? From the supreme. So concept of time is smaller. Supreme consciousness, which is the illuminator of all the experiences and which exists, transcending all realms of experiences, cannot be caught in the web of perception. Because it is the very perceiving principles of all equipments. Everything else other than this is object. This is the only one subject. And since it cannot be perceived, felt, or thought, it is not said to be existent, Sat. So Supreme Brahm cannot be characterized either positively or negatively. Why? Because these are the two types of thought waves. When we say something exists, something does not exist, these are the thought waves. And who illumines it? Self does. That's what we learned in the Taittiriya Upanishad. That Brahm is neither being nor being, is all that the scriptures can declare. Sarvataha pani padam tat, sarvata akshi shiromukham, sarvata shruti matloke, sarvam avritye tishtati. Sarvata, everywhere. Pani padam. Pani is the hands, padam is the feet. So with the hands and feet. That means that, again, sarvata, everywhere. Akshi, eyes. Shir is the head, and mukh is the mouth. With eyes, head, and mouth. Sarvata, everywhere. Shruti mat, with ears. Loke, in the world. Sarvam, all. Avritye, having enveloped. Tishtati, exists. With hands and feet everywhere. With eyes, heads, and mouths everywhere. With ears everywhere. He exists in the world, enveloping all. He's trying to explain or describe the unmanifest power. For the students like us, we have not experienced it. So he's describing it with the terminology which we normally use in this world. We work with the hands, we walk with the feet. Lord Krishna says, God can do all this without hands and feet. Okay, so without all that, but because they are everywhere, he's everywhere, he's doing everything is being done, but we don't see any of it. And then every eye, head, and mouth functions in the world because of the life that pulsates through it. All these equipments are working because of that power. That life is one everywhere. So that life principle is described here as everywhere, possessing eyes and ears and mouths. That exists pervading all. So if this principle of consciousness is defined and functioning through known physical equipments, because these terms are known to us, a student may doubt that life is expressing itself only where the equipments are functioning. So to remove this fallacy, he said that he exists pervading all. So that means where you don't even see the feet and the hands and the mouth and the eyes, he is there too. Sarvam avritye tishtati. Upanishads, they say that he can do the possible, the impossible, and the reverse of the possible. कर्तुम अकर्तुम अन्यथा कर्तुम समर्था. Chandogya Upanishad says, Sarvam Khal Vidam Brahma. Everywhere is Brahma. Everywhere. So he accepts food offerings made to him anywhere in the universe. He hears the prayers of his devotees whenever or wherever they may be. He is the witness of all that occurs in the three worlds. If the millions of devotees pray to him at the same time, he has no problem in accepting the prayers of all of them. This is what it means. In our lifetime, we have witnessed, some of us have, Lord Ganesha accepting drinking milk all over the world. Devotees' homes also, in the temples also, big temples, small temples in America, in India, or anywhere else at the same time. God can do all that. So this is what Lord Krishna is telling us. That sarvata panipadam tat sarvata akshishiro mukham sarvata shruti mat loke sarvam avritte tishta. We'll end our class today with the verse number 13. So let's do the Shanti Path also. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Viseshyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much.